Hi everyone, I'm Josh, and welcome today to my It's Finally Black History Month book tag. This is coming very late, as this tag was designed as a sort of beginning of the month type tag. But I learned about this just recently when I saw Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany do the book tag. I thought it looked like fun, so I figured I'd give it a go. Because it was intended, I think, for the beginning of the month, I'm going to be reframing some of these questions to fit the fact that I've basically at the end of the month now in all the books that I've read. With that in mind, I'm going to talk about a lot of books here, and I won't be getting too deeply in them. I'm going to basically be referring you to other things. Just because I'm short on time and I don't want this video to be too long, I just want to talk about some books I've read that I want to read and hopefully shed some light on some books, some authors that I think are worth reading. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the tag. Number one, what book are you looking forward to reading the most in honor of Black History Month, and which one are you looking forward to rereading the most? For this one, I'm going to give you the one that I was probably most excited to read this month, plus the reread I chose to do. First one is Womb City by Tlotlo Tsamasse. I just did a whole review of this. It's basically a sci-fi dystopian horror, and it was really good with some flaws that I think are important to note, but overall not too detrimental to the story. Again, check that review out for more. The Good House by Tananarive. I think I liked this even more than the first time. It's a haunted house weaving in family and some Haitian history or spirituality. And it was just really good. I go into this conversation in a vlog that should be coming out in a few months. Sorry, in a few weeks. Not months. Hopefully not months, dear God. And I'm going to save that discussion for that. But overall, I really liked it. And I think rereading it now, nearly 4 or 5 years after I read it the first time, I could clearly see how I've grown as a reader, which I am happy to see. And now a couple that I'm also considering rereading as well. Earthseed by Octavia. This is a dystopian sci-fi book that I'll talk more about in a second. But I spent a couple of years, I love this series, and I kind of want to reread it. The Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemison. I've read the first two, and I want to read the third one. But this series is so dense, I need to reread the first two. So those are 2 books that I want to reread this year. This is me tentatively agreeing or committing to that. Then next up, number 2, do you have a Black History Month TBR? And yes, I did. You can check out my winter TBR for that. I'm just going to give you the books that I actually read. So basically a wrap up, but a very concise one. Probably actually most of these books I'll talk about in the blog. Almost all of them actually. All of them I do actually. First up, Womb City by Tsamasse. Again, check out that review. Long Division by Laymon. A young adult book about a young boy coming of age, and it's kind of this complex time travel narrative interweaved into it. It's kind of ambitious in its style, but I think for the better overall. Phoenix Constant Struggle by Angela White Davis. It's a great nonfiction series of essays that I read for the book community read, book club, I guess. The Good House by Tananarive, of course, I read that. The Ecstatic by LaValle. The only disappointment, and the first time I've ever been disappointed by LaValle, like every other book's been like a 4.5 or higher. This follows a young boy, or young man rather's experience as a obese, mentally ill individual, and it follows his experience trying to fit in with his family. And because he's mentally ill, it follows his perspective that is not reliable, and things get extremely absurd in a way that just was really hard to follow. And unfortunately, this was a like Long Division, a ambitious novel that just did not mesh with me and could not appreciate it for what it was doing, just because of how difficult it made the overall experience of reading it. Next up, Will of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. This is a classic. I basically, after Ecstatic, I needed something that I didn't think would be too difficult, but also kind of uplifting. This is a story about a family during Jim Crow South. It is dark in that sense, but it is fundamentally hopeful, and a story about surviving and pushing through and finding a place in a world that doesn't want you. And it's just, overall, I think a very hopeful novel, and one that did a good job of making me feel more motivated to read more books. After that, I read Changing All Stars by Kwame. Adjei-Brenyah. This is a dystopian sci-fi future book that basically feels like Hunger Games, but it's really just gladiators with prisoners, and it's a really fantastic discussion of just the prison industrial complex, or the way you dehumanize prisoners. It's just so good. Excellent book. I loved it. Then finally, The Black Flamingo by Atta. This is a young adult coming-of-age story of this young queer black boy who finds drag as a way of presenting his identity, or rather, of expressing himself. And it was so beautiful, so gorgeous. I had to hold back tears on multiple occasions throughout this book. So good. 100% recommend. But at number 3, are there any new releases by Black authors you're highly anticipating? Obviously, Womb City was one, probably the biggest one. I'm also highly anticipating now Black Heart Man by Nalo Hopkinson, which I just heard about because that was coming out from in Jerry from Onyx Pages, so shout out to her for bringing that to my attention. I've only read a few of Nalo Hopkinson's books. I've liked them, loved some of them, so I am eager that we try this out to see how I feel about it. She is not one who comes out with books very frequently. One of You by Aaron E. Adams. This is one that I discovered when making this tag, actually, for thinking about what I answers here. Because I read Jackal last year, and I really, really liked it. It was this horror mixed with mystery thriller. I thought it was a really good use of those two different genres and melding them together. They do blend together naturally, but I feel like this one definitely felt like it was started out heavy in the mystery thriller and then very much delved into the horror. I love seeing mystery thrillers go in that direction, and it was just a really well-done story, dealing with issues around race and other issues that was really well explored. And finally, How to Be Heard by Roxane Gay. Roxane Gay is one of my favorite nonfiction writers. And while I'm not necessarily a writer per se, I am curious to see what I can get from this as a scientist who does do science writing. So it's something that I'm eager to see what she talks about, even if I'm not strictly a writer myself. Then number 4, what was your favorite read by a Black author the previous year? This one obviously would be On Women by Victor LaValle. I say obvious because it was in my top books of the year. Here are my thoughts about that book there. It's a great book, historical fiction, sort of horror, monstrous horror. That's the Name of Son by John James Baldwin. This was what for the series of James Baldwin books I did for the James Baldwin readathon, or the read along, or whichever it was, by Erica for the Broken Spine. This is one I chose as my favorite among his. It's just because of all the books I've read by him, which I've read several at this point. It's so interesting to see him explore these ideas through a more direct nonfiction lens. And it's just, I think it's a really good complement to his other stories, especially having already read several of his fiction works. And then lastly, Out There Screaming, edited by Jordan Peele. This is a really great horror collection anthology that is overall just really great. A lot of the stories worked for me really well. Some of them not as much, but even those that did not resonate still had a very deliberate purpose with how they were using the horror. And for me, that made it they were all very effective horror in that sense, even if they didn't all resonate on a personal level with me. And then number 5, what was your favorite read by a Black author across the diaspora from the previous year? And I believe what this is asking is including authors who are not just Black Americans, which I didn't say last time. They was asking favorite Black American author. And for this one, it's made me realize I actually didn't read anyone who was not an American. But for this, I'm going to highlight 2 Haitian American writers. First up, of course, Roxane Gay, Opinions. I like this. It is not my favorite of hers just because it felt way less focused than all the other ones. She still had a lot of great things to say. This one, I think, went more heavy in the literary and also just film critiques, which I do enjoy that perspective. I wouldn't mind just seeing a full collection of stories that have to do with books and or film and TV critiques strictly. And then Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. This, of course, what I talked about, Aaron E. Adams is a Haitian American as well. Number 6, what classic Black American literary work would you recommend to someone new to reading Black literature? And this one is where I'm going to bring this back to Earthseed by Octavia Butler. This is a duology, parable, the solar parable, the talents. This series resonates with me on such a fundamental level, not because it's so of the story itself, which is this near future dystopia where climate change is getting worse and fascist right-leaning leaders are getting into the government, and we're just seeing basically society is breaking down for various reasons. At its core, the story is one of hope, and it's a story of the philosophy of Earthseed, of God as change, which in principle it's just the idea that change is inevitable. You cannot stop it, but you can shape it. And it's at its core, it's kind of a simple idea, but I think it is much more profound than it seems, because it's really, I think, motivational when you think about that lens of change is going to happen regardless. We may not have a big impact on that change, but as a collective, we can have a much bigger impact on the direction of change. And it's all about recognizing what the impact you could have and thinking about your actions and how they contribute to change in a number of ways, on a personal level, and a familial level, and on a societal level. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful, basic philosophy that I actually resonate with on such a very strong level that makes this series my favorite of all time, and it's one that I will automatically recommend as a classic people should read. Very easy to recommend. Then up at number 7, what are your favorite Black American authors, and which of their books is your favorite? I'm focusing on 3 here that could go on forever. Octavia Butler, obviously. Earthseed, naturally. But I'll say my second favorite, since I already talked about Earthseed, twice now, or 3 times now, I guess, it would be Kindred. Kindred was my favorite for a long time, my favorite book of all time. I think the difference between these two is that while I really like Kindred, it's a very well-written book, great use of time travel, which I love, and it looks at the horrors of slavery in a very, I think, important way. But I think I've come to appreciate just the direction that Earthseed went. Earthseed doesn't stray away from racism and all the other systems of oppression, but it's just, I come to value not necessarily fixating on the worst parts of history. I really like Kindred in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I feel like there may have been just an over fixation on the thrill of just the horrors of the situation, which it rubs me the wrong way to think about what parts of that book I like the most, being compelling for at least originally when I read this, because I read this, I think, at this time nearly 10 years ago now, and I do think that was probably part of it, just the thrill of the situation, which I think was a shallow and I think, but just somewhat harmful mentality. And that's just something I guess I'm thinking about with this. I'm not confident in my words here. I don't have time to edit a lot of this, but hopefully I'm communicating clearly my thoughts here. I'm trying to be as open and honest about this as possible. Oh, that was just the first one. James Baldwin. I've read a lot of his. I already talked about that. Another Country, one I need to reread, but I think this is my favorite just because it started out as like, oh, I don't like this because it was just confusing because we have so many different perspectives that are being woven together, but they come together as we realize the connection of all these different people. And it's just these different perspectives that highlight different experiences in a way that is just so expertly done. And I'm just so impressed by Baldwin's ability to just be able to empathize with different perspectives, different people. And it's just such a powerful novel. And I really like Baldwin. I think this really exemplifies his skill as an author. And then finally, Tananarive. I like all of her books. I've loved specifically The Good House, obviously, and The Between. Honestly, I'm not sure which one's better in my mind, and I'm not going to try to answer that now. Then up at number 8, the last question. Because you should be reading Black literature and Black stories year-round, what books by Black authors do you plan on reading this year? I've highlighted several already. The Source of Self-Regard by Toni Morrison. I'm going to be reading that along with Erica for the Broken Spine. We'll be doing a buddy read and hopefully a live discussion of that. That is planned. It's on the paper. It's on the books, whatever you call it. Girl, Woman, Other by, I forget her last name. I just didn't type it here. This is a story that follows a series of different perspectives of women, I think in the modern day. And I've been hesitant because it won, I think, the Booker Prize. Is that what it was? I'm worried it would be too dense and literary. But one thing I've heard, I don't think that is necessarily the same. I don't think that's necessarily the case. From what I've heard, it should be pretty readable. And I think there's a lot of good commentary. Again, the benefit of those perspectives, it's the way in which books can explore multifaceted variety of perspectives can be really impactful. And that's why I really want to read this. Dawn by, again, Octavia Butler. This is another series I want to, because this is the only thing I haven't read by Octavia Butler now. It's her Xenomorph series, whatever it's called. And so I want to start it this year, Dawn. Probably not more than Dawn. I don't want to rush through her last series that I haven't read yet. And then finally, I wanted to mention River Solomon because I hate they don't have any books out yet. I'm eager to read more of that works. And because I haven't talked about them yet, I do love them. And if I were to give you an extensive list of favorite authors, they would be one of them. But I have not read their short story, Blood is Another Word for Hunger. And I want to. It is queer and it is horror. That's all I know. It's a short story. And so I figured it'd be nice to highlight it here because I do want to commit to reading it this year. That is the extent of this tag. I had a lot of fun filming it, and hopefully it's not too intense to edit. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. Maybe you should consider the tag yourself if you're a booktuber. Otherwise, let me know the answer to your favorite questions below if you're not a booktuber, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these questions, honestly. Just let me know. Have a great day, and stay safe, everyone.